Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. My name is Kain. I'm a League of Legends player, content creator and coach. And if you didn't know that by now, shame on you. However, you can redeem yourself by liking and subscribing the video. Also, specifically for today's video, just this one time you can call me Chef Kain as I'm about to cook up some builds for you guys. Well, honestly, I already did most of the cooking and I'm just going to show you guys my end results, so bear with me here. So first of all, let's talk about why do we need a new build? Well, there was Split 2, everything was decently fine, Vladimir wasn't in the best meta, but then yesterday they decided to basically get here with Split 3, and they nerfed many items. They nerfed some very important items to Vladimir, they nerfed them into the ground, and thus many people have been scared, many people are fearing. I see it on Reddit, I see it all over the internet really, on streams, everywhere, where specifically for Vladimir, people are like, oh, my champion is deleted, like, Cosmic Drive got guttered, like, Death Cap is weaker, like, Ionian Boots got nerfs, Vladimir was already quite weak, so I'm gonna have to find a new main, this and that. And honestly, when I read the patch note for the first time, that's exactly what went through my mind. Now, after playing quite some games already, probably too much and way too much for what I should have been playing these past couple of days, or like, literally, basically yesterday and today, I played way too much actually. I've also been spending way too much time in practice too, but at the very least, I came up with some good builds. So guys, please give me a like and subscribe for the effort that I put in this. Now, let's get started. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is boots. I think by now we all know that Ionian boots are basically nerfed into the ground. You will spend 900 gold for 10 ability haste and just some movement speed. So, keep in mind, these boots, they came from 20 ability haste, I believe. They nerfed it to 15 ability haste. It was 850 gold at some point. Now they're 900 gold again, and they only give you 10 ability haste. So, for me personally, I will basically go sorcery shoes in 90% of my games from now on. I believe it's ridiculous if we allow Riot to do these nerfs. These boots are just useless. And I don't want to buy them, like, because one, they're going to be useless, and two, just out of a statement to Riot, like, please buff these boots. Now, does that mean that you can never go them? No, you can still go these boots. I believe that in very hard matchups in mid lane, and also in top lane, because there you have many fist fight matchups, very many matchups where enemies can all-in you, that buying the city boots is still going to be of value. Why? They're cheaper than sorcery shoes, so you can rush them. In mid lane, like, early boots is nice to, like, dodge skill shots in skill shots oriented matchups like Syndra or Orianna, things like that. Also in hard matchups like Orianna, for example, not only to dodge the skill shots, but also for more sustain, more Qs, more pulls, things like that. In top lane as well, you're going to do a lot of fist fighting, so having shorter ability cooldowns is going to help you a lot. Now, the boots aren't going to be that good anymore, right? They look really shit. But like I said, you can still go them in those situations. However, I will mainly be going sorcery shoes, whether I'm top or mid, unless I'm in very difficult matchups where I need early sustain. Or sometimes as well, like, a reason why, like, not many people really think about it like this, but ability haste is super OP to snowball your early game. So when you have like 1 or 2 kills, it's great to rush Ionian boots because the ability haste is super broken in early game. Because in early game, Vladimir has relatively high base damage, but his main weakness is obviously his mobility, and 2, his high ability cooldowns. Now, ability haste can fix that. Even though it's only 10 ability haste, keep in mind, if you go Transcendence and Legend Haste, together with boots, you can still have a significant amount of ability haste, relatively quick in the game. So with that, you can actually have some good ability haste here, and if you rush it, I think it's still fine. But Ionian boots, because they only give you 10 ability haste, they are basically rush boots. If you don't rush them anymore, I don't see any point in buying them anymore. Because obviously the longer the game goes on, the less ability haste becomes good. Right? That's just normal. If you buy like 20 ability haste early on, it might be like 2 seconds difference or 3 seconds difference in your queue. If you do that later in the game, it might only be like 0.5 seconds that your queue gets diminished by 20 ability haste, you know? So it's very OP in the early game, so if you rush them in very difficult matchups or when you're snowballing, I think you could still go them. But personally, I will go for sorcery shoes in like 90% of my matchups. Okay, that was the boots. Now we go to the build. Now, I already have a favorite build so far that I enjoyed the most. Now let me explain. So first of all, sorcery shoes, we just covered that. So yeah, we just buy them. Then Storm Surge. Storm Surge is one of the very few items that were only nerfed, like not that much, just a little bit, right? Storm Surge will still provide you with some good movement speed and actually quite a lot of damage. Because think of it like this. Storm Surge was already an item that you wanted to pick up in the last split. It was already decent, but now it's really good because it was only nerfed slightly and the other items are nerfed like very, very significantly. So this item went from like A tier or like B tier to like literally S tier or S plus tier. And I believe many champions, not only Vladimir, but many champions will start picking this up, especially as a replacement to Shadowflame. So I think it's still a great item. Then what I would do after that is you either can build Void Staff or Death Cap, depending on situation. Why even consider Void Staff this early in your build? Well, Void Staff is right now super OP. Why? Well, it was kind of useless in Split 2 and Split 1, if I believe, because they introduced Crit Bloom and Void Staff just didn't pack enough punch. Now, they buffed Void Staff multiple times, I believe 2 times, or maybe more, to the point where it actually became a good item last split. Like by the end of last split, it was actually a good item. I've already built it over Crit Bloom at that point. But now on top of that, they didn't nerf Void Staff, they just left it as it was, but they did nerf Crit Bloom, so there's literally not any reason anymore why we wouldn't go Void Staff over Crit Bloom. Always go Void Staff from now on, unless they buff or nerf it again. Now, it's not only good compared to Crit Bloom, it's good compared to any other item in the game because they nerfed almost every single AP item and then Void Staff they left untouched. To give you an idea, Storm Surge, which is a good item, gives you 95 AP, but so does Void Staff. It gives you the same amount of AP as a Storm Surge, and it has 40% magic penetration. So this item right now has actually become ridiculously strong. It's actually really, really strong. So you should, in every full build, you should build it. Now the only argument you could make is when do I build it? Well, typically what happens is whenever people have 2 items, like let's say a Vayne, your enemy Vayne, your enemy Akshan, enemy Irelia, whatever. Typically when enemies have 2 items, that's like their core build, and then they have more room to start building resistances like Mercury Threads, Mavma Morses on a Riven or something, or on a Wukong, Witsend on a Vayne, things like that. So they can start building these items as a 3rd, 4th, 5th item, etc. So typically what you want to do is you want to match your Void Staff. You want to buy that when they're buying their magic resist so that you don't get yourself in a position where you temporarily don't have any magic penetration, but the enemy do have a lot of magic resist. That would be a very weak spot for you in the game. So you want to anticipate on that. So therefore, typically you want to build your Void Staff at the very last as a 4th item, but if you can as a 3rd or 2nd item depending on the game. Now, as a 2nd item, you're not going to get that much benefit out of it, purely for the reason that many people will not really stack magic resist that much, so then you don't really need the percentage magic penetration that much. Then it's okay to just go with the flat pan of Storm Surge and Sorcery Shields. But I would still pick it up if I don't have enough gold for Rabadon's Death Cap, because like we said, we want to build Void Staff anyway in our build, so typically it's a 3rd or 4th item. But if I don't have the gold income to build my Death Cap early on, I would just go with Void, as simple as that, and then go Death Cap. However, if I can buy needlessly large rods, if I recall, and I can just buy, I have like 1.2k gold in base, I will just buy a needlessly large rod and start completing my Death Cap instead. And then build Void Staff after. And then as a last item, or like one of your last items, what would you complete your core build of here? It would be typically a Riftmaker. Because at this point you have a lot of burst, but you might lack some HP, like you might lack some sustainability, like sustainable damage in team fights, HP, ability haste, so like more ability rotations, and that's exactly what Riftmaker offers you. So Riftmaker could be a great addition here to your build, and then you can finish it up with something like Zhonya's or whatever you may need. But this looks so far, and it feels like my most favorite build. Problem is, it has some weaknesses. In the sense that there's a lot of pen and there's a lot of damage, and the ridiculous that you do with this build is absolutely insane. It's funny how they try to remove damage from the game, but if you go this build, you can blow up any ADC. They can even build a Hex Drinker. It does not matter. You will blow them up instantly. So that's kind of funny. Problem is, if you go this amount of burst, you're going to lack some, or like for a very long time until you have Riftmaker, you're going to lack some ability haste, some HP, some, just in general, some stats that might be useful for team fights and longer team fights. That's where this build comes into place. Now, this build is a build that we already used to go, especially for the top laners in Split 2, especially when the enemy team had a more bruiser / tanky oriented team. You would go Ionians or Sorcery Shoes, like one of the two, into Cosmic Drive, into Riftmaker, and then typically you follow it up by a Deathcap or Void, because these two items you always want to include in your build. That build is going to stay the same for this split, I would say. Even though they somehow gutted Cosmic Drive into the ground, I think it's still unmatched in what it wants to do. So hear me out. For me, an item becomes useless and I don't want to buy it anymore if it stops being the best in its role that it has to perform. What does Cosmic Drive have to perform? Like, why do we build Cosmic Drive in the first place? Why did we build it in the first place on Vladimir? Well, I build it personally because of two things. I don't really care about the HP, it's useful, right? It gives AP, that's also useful. Obviously, you want AP on an item. But the two key components that made this, or the two key things that made this item so valuable, were one, the insane amount of movement speed that it offered, and two, the insane amount of ability haste. And yes, they gutted, or they nerfed the movement speed into the ground, but it's still better than no movement speed. That's what I would argue. If you don't build it, what other items are you going to build? Right? Maybe Storm Surge, that's why in this build we go it. We also get like a movement speed from that, and I accidentally deleted it from the list. But like, other than that, I think Cosmic Drive is still going to be great for movement speed. Like, it's not good anymore, but it's better than nothing. And additionally to that, can you tell me, guys, can you give me one item that will give you 25 ability haste that's viable on Vladimir? Like, Horizon Focus doesn't count because obviously it's not viable on Vladimir anymore. So Cosmic Drive might be the only item that can give you some movement speed and 25 ability haste in one item, which is still the reason why I would go it. It's worse, it's a lot worse than last split, but there's no better item as an alternative. And that might be a flaw in the League of Legends item system, but it is what it is. We can cry about it all we want. It's just going to be still the better option in games where you fight bruisey or tanky team comps. And then Riftmaker, it wasn't really nerfed that much. It was only nerfed slightly. So you definitely want to pick it up with the Cosmic Drive here versus those tanky team comps and bruisers. And then again, you can finish it up with Deathcap, with Void, for also raw damage and Magic Pen. That is how I currently view it. The problem is, this build feels really good in squishies. It's amazing. And this build feels meh. It feels B tier into bruiser tanky team comps. It used to be, I would say, it felt like B plus or A tier last split. It was also still not super good, but it was like decent. Now it feels like decent or less than decent. Like, you know, it feels, you significantly feel the difference between last season and or last split and this split with the same build. But there's still no better alternative, so I would still go for this build versus bruiser or tanky team comps. And then we might come up with a third build, and this is where the real cooking has been done. Right? This is where I really cooked. And this is the alternative build. This is a build that already used to go, I believe, in Split 1, when Storm Surge was just released and it was really, really strong. And then they nerfed it into the ground and it was useless, so you couldn't really go this build anymore. But like in Split 1, when everyone went like Riftmaker Liandry's and everyone was having fun, I didn't really enjoy Riftmaker Liandry's because it lacked damage. You were like a battle mage, but like a lack of damage. And Vladimir, the only thing he offers is damage, so you want to like have damage. And then Riftmaker Liandry's didn't really do that for me. So then what I did at that point was I tried to mix builds and came up with a super build, which was basically this one. Now let me explain it. The explanation why I used it then is basically going to be the same why I use it now. So let me explain. First of all, Storm Surge is really broken right now. It gives you movement speed in early game, like on the proc, and also in team fights. It's amazing. On the other hand, it gives you an insane amount of burst early game, especially when paired up with Sorcery Shoes. To give you a reference, if you have Sorcery Shoes, and you have the Hextech Revolver component, you can basically 100 to 0 everyone who's squishy in the game. It's insane how much raw damage you have. Now, if you complete Storm Surge, your damage will only increase. And this is fine. The problem with Storm Surge is it gives you movement speed, but it doesn't give you ability haste, it doesn't give you HP, so for longer team fights, it's not an amazing item. It's more like for the side lane, for the laning phase, for like 1v1 situations. Now, so it's great therefore that we buy it early as a first item. That's what makes it great, because in the early game we have many 1v1 situations. Now, the longer the game goes on, we're going to face more team fights, more early game skirmishes in the river, for dragon fights, for heralds, for jungle invades, or dives, or roams. You're going to be, like, the map unlocks at some point, and you're going to be in longer fights and skirmishes. Now, what's the stats that we need for those longer fights and skirmishes? The stats that are very good in those skirmishes and fights are HP, ability haste, movement speed, the things that make us more durable and more sustainable in those fights. That's exactly what something like a Riftmaker or a Cosmic Drive will offer you. Now, even though Riftmaker only got slightly nerfed and Cosmic Drive got heavily nerfed, I would still opt for the Cosmic Drive. Because Riftmaker doesn't give you the mobility, and Cosmic Drive, while it only gives you like not that much movement speed anymore, any movement speed is really useful on Vladimir, as there is already so little in the game. With this split, there's even less mobility in the game. So I feel like the need for it has increased. So even though this item has nerfed, our need has increased because of that. So then Cosmic Drive is still a decent option here to go for. So then I would go here, Storm Surge into Cosmic Drive. We become more of a team fight oriented champion, and we finish it off with a Death Cap, Void Staff, and then Riftmaker is a perfect last item to become even better in those team fight oriented situations. Now, if you want to, you can put Riftmaker here somewhere in between, but the problem is you're going to stall your Void Staff very late, or you're going to stall your Death Cap very late, for example, and that's going to be an issue. So typically, the way this build should look like is something like this, where the Riftmaker is going to be on the end of the build, and Death Cap and Void Staff as early as possible to make sure that you are as strong as possible in the early and mid game, right? So this is probably going to be my favorite build. So far, from everything I've tested, this here is my favorite build, so I don't include the Cosmic Drive. I instantly go into Death Cap, Void, Riftmaker. So it's basically the same build without the Cosmic Drive. But I believe that like this is only good against like very squishy team comps. Against teams who are very beefy, you should go this, but it doesn't feel that great. So maybe as an alternative, if you have team comps that are in between, or maybe also against the bruiser tanky team comps, this is a build that could be amazing as well. And I believe this is going to be my favorite new build. This is the one I currently enjoy the most. And I want to do some more experimenting with this one. But I believe this is going to be, again, the build that I will enjoy the most. So that's basically all the cooking I did. These are all the conclusions I came up with. When it comes to tanky builds, I don't like them. And I'm not a big fan of the tanky builds. I know like Elite 500 came up with some tanky builds and WMAX and all that stuff. And I didn't like them before. I didn't like his tanky build before. I didn't like his WMAX. It felt all like suboptimal. It felt off meta, and it was more like, in my opinion, it felt more like experimenting than actually the optimal way to play Vladimir. And that's why currently I don't really like to think about tanky builds, because we are Vladimir. We're not a tank. We don't have any CC, so there's no, like, what is the point in Vladimir living long? What's the point in your champion living long? You don't offer anything in your team. Whether you live in a fight 20 seconds or 5 seconds, who cares? You don't offer any CC, you don't offer anything. It doesn't matter how long you live, it's the damage that you deal in the fights, that's what matters. Did you kill 2 people, or did you not? That's the only thing that mattered. Did you kill the enemy high-value targets like the ADC and the mid laner, or did you not do that? Whether you live or not doesn't matter. Your champion only does damage, so you need to deal damage, and that's what you need to do. And you need to build optimally for getting out as much or outputting as much damage as possible in those fights. And that's what I believe these builds will do for you. Now, the only other build that you could perhaps consider is putting Liandry's in some build. They nerfed it quite significantly, I would say. But it's still fine in the sense that if they have super tanky teams, the max health burn here from Liandry's is still going to be very, very useful. So let's say they have things like Cho'Gath or Sion, like very heavy HP champions, and they have like 3 in their team of them. Then you don't necessarily have to go with this build. You could also add Liandry's to that, like Riftmaker Liandry's, for example. You could go with that. I do believe Liandry's has a place in builds, here in this season, but it's definitely not going to be core. It's going to be very niche. And there's very niche situations where there's so many like heavy tanks, like an Ornn or something. I think Lianris can be amazing, but it's going to be very, very niche. So I'll call this the niche item. But yeah, other than that, I think these are the best builds you could go for right now. And after I made this video here, after I recorded this, I will start experimenting more with this one, as I believe this is going to be my favorite one. But for now, this is the one I had the most success on. So hopefully, guys, you learned something from this. I really hope you do, because I made this video for you. Because I would right now very much be just going in game and playing as many Vladimir games as possible. I make this video and I use this time for you guys to make sure that you guys can settle down a bit. You guys can have a build to start playing again, and you don't have to feel like you should main another champion. Now, Vladimir has insanely bad win rate, I believe, and I think he will continue to have quite a bad win rate, as, yeah, it's just not really his split, I would say. But these builds will make it a lot easier, and rather than crying about it, I like to come up with solutions, so these builds are the solutions to the current situation, and hopefully these builds will help you out to get to your ranked goals. With that being said, thank you guys for watching. Feel free to leave a like and subscribe here on the video and on the channel to see more future videos like this, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Bye.